I always believed that the gallery was too exclusive, so I felt like the streets need to be the new gallery. I started painting murals probably around 98, and we did a lot of community work. Instead of trying to be an artist in this city, I feel like you either end up bartending part-time or you end up as a community worker, and I chose community worker. So I spent a lot of time in organizations whose leadership was privileged, as an understatement, in terms of saying their priorities were not about what do the youth want, but how could they make some glossy pamphlet about what was going on with the youth. But as a youth worker, we're too marginalized and underpaid to actually step beyond just helping people who walk in the door get through their daily bullshit. But what I did learn during that time, and a lot of that time we were getting city funding, and so what I did learn is that what has happened with the holistic master planning of Regent Park is really important to the development of like all those organizations you say. Put your hand up if you've been to Daniel's Spectrum. 2 people. I really encourage you to go. Like, I know Regent Park's the hood, and I know it feels like I go to Regent Park, but trust me,
it's nothing like what you've known it to be.
Right. There's even a restaurant called Paint Box that you can't afford to be there.
Yeah.
So I like to really value the story of Regent. I love that you give us opportunities. It's hard sometimes if you're trying to have a visual arts practice like myself, doing canvas work and exhibitions, to break through the mold of approaching galleries and getting membership. You know what I mean? Like, membership has fees. Some of the exhibitions have fees. Sometimes grant processes have a lot of barriers for people to like accessibility for it. But I actually wanted to tell you guys a story, and because my world is I've been sort of how to occupy public space, how to facilitate ownership of public space. That's my thing. So I moved into Kensington Market 4 years ago, I think 4 years ago, and I moved into a storefront. So it was a home, but it was a store. But we weren't selling anything. We were trying to sell art. But anyways, you get the point. So we were there, and there was a wall, right? Like, we have a stoop, maybe from here to the second row, or even further, a stoop, and there was a wall right there. So, as soon as I got there, I was, anxious to paint the wall. So I did the wall. So I was talking with my roommate, and he goes, "Oh, let's do Rob Ford." This was during the heart of the Rob Ford saga, pre-tumor stuff. And he, sorry, I didn't mean that about it. And so we put him we did him in a salami sandwich. Like, we made the top of his head, like, had salami, pieces of salami. We had mustard coming out of his mouth. He was the gravy train Rob Ford, right? So at this point in time, the city had just changed the definition of graffiti. I don't know if you know this, but the city has a definition of graffiti, right? And the definition is that if it is not a commissioned piece of artwork on the wall, meaning the property owner did not have a letter dating showing that this was commissioned, then it is deemed vandalism and subject to abatement. And if you don't comply with that within 60 days, then the city will fine you for the abatement charges that they'll give to some third-party company. Right? So what we did, so I did this wall without the permission of the property owner. It's not my landlord's business because it's beside, so there's a setback in my property. It's his wall. I didn't ask him permission. And I just figured it's Kensington Market, things are kind of loose over there, you can do your own thing. And so I painted his picture in the ham sandwich, the salami sandwich, and my landlord comes to me 2 weeks later and he says, "Javid, I got a notice from the city saying that there's graffiti on my wall. Can you remove that? I'll take $200 off your rent." So I go, "But okay, that's real cool, sir, but that's not your wall, that's the neighbor's wall." So he showed me the letter, so the address is mistaken, that's not your problem, you don't have to worry about it. He said, "Listen, I don't want any hassles, just buff the wall." So I go, "Okay." He's like, "Just put any colors over it." So here I am, so this is a Saturday morning, I'm covering over Rob Ford's face. I'm about halfway through his face. The guy who's actually there beside comes outside and he goes, "Javid, what are you doing?" And I go, "Listen, man, my landlord asked me." He goes, it's not your landlord's wall." I said, "I know, but Saturday morning, I'm covering over Rob Ford's face. I'm about halfway through his face. The guy who's actually there beside comes outside and he goes, "Javid, what are you doing?" And I go, listen, man, my landlord asked me, he goes, it's not your landlord's wall. I said, I know, but it just goes to show that whole episode. And the reason the guy was like, listen, I'll pay you the money, he's like, I'm a lawyer. He was a lawyer, he's a human rights lawyer. And he was like, if the city says anything, I'll take him to court. You know, he was like, we'll make you the example. Are you okay with that? You can be the example. And I was like, I don't know, just pay my rent, bro. You know? But I think that's, over all the years I look back at murals, whether commissioned or uncommissioned, I think the irony of it, and whether people want to call it graffiti or street art, I mean, I could talk for days on all of the complications of those definitions, but I think the reality is that it is a realm of people taking ownership of their public space, sometimes not waiting for the opportunity or permission, and I think that's the virtue of it, you know what I mean? And so much so that it's become like $1 billion industry. You have Bansky, the Tate Modern, et cetera, Shepherd, Fail and stuff. But I think that moment that you decide to say, listen, I don't know what the bylaws are, I don't know what this is, but I'm going to go out and make my mark. That's a moment when you transgress the sort of things that we conform to by living in a city and in a society, and that's where the real interactions happen, because people will confront you, and then you have to rationalize with them why it's important to you. Like, I've been out painting at 4 in the morning, this is all off the record, right? I guess not really. Anyways, I was painting at 4 in the morning, and this old man is looking at me like, what are you doing, And I was like, sir, doesn't it look better now? And he's like, he didn't want to agree with me, right? But, I think that's the point of, when we talk about public space, and I think you have to talk about where do people have ownership? Where do people actually control what things look like versus, listen, this is just my property. I mean, you can cut me off when you want, but I've had the pleasure of the last 4 years of investing in a Master's of Architecture, which is something I really didn't want to go back to school because I feel it's highly institutional and biased in the way that we learn, but lo and behold, I ended up, really falling in love with the spirit of designing buildings and stuff. And so, one of the funniest things I found now practicing is like, you have people who own $700,000 properties downtown who can't move their home 2 feet back because there's neighborhood opposition, because these bylaws say this. So it's like, I understand that the bylaws are constructed with sort of community in mind in terms of like, listen, if we all take advantage, then where will we end up? But I think that people have such restrictions on how they can actually express themselves in their own property, in private space. We're not even talking about public space. But the face of private space is what becomes the public space. You know what I mean? And so I think that we have to devise ways to gain ownership. I think Nuit Blanche is a good attempt at that, because people are like, okay, listen, for tonight, these whole streets are ours. These are our streets. But how many, put your hand up if you love Nuit Blanche. See, it's got to be everybody's hand up. See, the problem is even Nuit Blanche is not doing a good job. But I think Nuit Blanche is in the right direction. I think Toronto suffers from conservatism when it comes to how to deal with our public space. But I really do believe that not enough people take the risk of doing something bold with what whenever they don't want to deal with the bureaucracy of the matter, or they don't actually own the property. So what can they change? If you don't own property, what are you really subject to changing? You can walk around the whole city. What can you actually change physically about the city?
I think in addition to public space, the question is, how much public art can be added to those spaces to make it accessible, inviting, fun, and attractive and colorful? There's a lot of spaces in Toronto that are deemed heritage, spaces. There are a lot of walls in the city that have been painted on because the landlord has asked artists has commissioned artists to paint on their walls. And I think the purpose of public art is to arrest and stop the pedestrian and really to come in and enjoy what's there, right? Unlike museums and galleries, where it's about the individual in a box looking at artwork. Public space is open, it's usually outside, it's free. Anyone can go there anytime they want. I mean, things shouldn't get destroyed, but if they are, it's like, it's, you know, people think about that. Or usually, people will have a maintenance plan to go with that piece of work. With that, I think Toronto is working towards getting more public art in the city. I think it still has a far way to go, considering other cities in North America, or even in the world, like Europe has. And I'm thinking in the arena of street art, right?
But I feel like we're so limited. I mean, you mentioned Colombia. In Bogota, they did this one thing, like, and this is top-down stuff, because it's coming from municipal level funding. So every time somebody got hit by a car, they painted a big yellow star on the street there. You know what I mean? Like, that's just like a very simple example of how, I guess, you know, occupying a public space becomes a direct representation of what's actually happening, you know? And involving street art. I don't know if, like, our city has, have you guys heard of the START program? Street Art Toronto, people might have heard. So that program is worth, they spend about 300 grand annually on about maybe 20 organizations.
And or artists.
And or artists. And they're fundamentally different than what the previous graffiti transformation was called. So it used to be that an organization got 20 grand for the summer, and they'd employ 4 kids to be mentored and learn soft skill training to make community murals. Okay? Now, it's like, let's give all that money to an artist to make a high quality mural. And if there's some mentorship, that's cool. How do you feel about that?
I mean, I think there's still a lot of issues with that program. I mean, with what, they're in their 3rd year now? 3rd year. And I still feel like there's a lot more to go. The folks in charge of that program, I mean, they're trying to emulate what other cities are doing without understanding what the city of Toronto is, right? Not understanding the architecture in the city, what places are important. I mean, it's a start that we can actually do that stuff, and that there is funding for that. But at the same time, if artists want to do something, they should be able to do something without having to ask permission. Because artists are supposed to do stuff, just do it, right? They shouldn't have to.